responsible for TVET. Dr. Hamilton Gemont on my far left, he's a measurement and evaluation officer here at CXC, responsible for CVQs. And joining us later will be Mr. Henderson Eastman. He is the executive director of the Barbados TVET Council. Gentlemen, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you very much.
Let's start from the beginning. What was the genesis of the Caribbean Vocational Qualifications, Dr. Gemont?
Well, the Caribbean Vocational Qualifications started as an initiative through the CARICOM. Ministers of Education had met, and the intention was for us to be able, when I say us, the people of the Caribbean, to be able to gain particular types of qualifications and to be able to use those qualifications in the wider Caribbean. And when I say the wider Caribbean, I'm talking about being able to use them in different territories of the Caribbean. Because of the nature of them, they would be acceptable to all countries across the Caribbean.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wilshire, you have been involved with CVQs from day one, more or less. You were at secondary school and now you're at the Ministry of Education. In your view, what would you say are CVQs?
Within the school setting, CVQs will be work-based qualifications that basically assess a person's or students' competence in the work environment. So in schools, what we aim to do through the CVQs is actually prepare students for the world of work. And this will be done in a method that will basically reflect what the employer expects students to have or to bring to give them their turn or go to work after leaving school.
Right. So you said in the school setting, so are there other qualifications similar to the CVQs that are not in the school setting?
The similar qualification will be NVQ, which is basically the National Vocational Qualifications, but those are mainly done within industry. But the school setting we concentrate on the CVQ program.
Right, and this brings me back to Dr. Gemont, because Mr. Wilshire said that in the school setting, in the out-of-school setting, there are NVQs.
National Vocational Qualifications.
Right. So how did CXC get involved in terms of offering CVQs? What is the difference between NVQ and CVQs?
Okay, the National Vocational Qualifications generally are qualifications designed by, through the development of standards, occupational standards, by individual countries. And individual countries traditionally would have offered these qualifications within their own territories. The Caribbean Vocational Qualifications, on the other hand, would be utilizing the same occupational standards or similar occupational standards, but for this framework, what is happening is that those qualifications can be used across the various territories of the Caribbean.
Okay, so basically in the school system they are called CVQs,
yes,
and outside of school they are NVQs.
Generally.
Okay, right, that's quite simple. What are some of the areas, when we talk about CVQs, what are some of the areas can students pursue in the school system under the CVQ program?
Okay. Areas would include cosmetology, barbering, carpentry, masonry, electrical installation, and coming soon students will also be doing business administration as well. So there are a wide range of areas that schools can actually do, but we are doing it on an incremental basis, and we are basically introducing occupations through I think what we're about. So first we started with carpentry, masonry, and electrical installation, and now we are going into cosmetology and barbering.
Those are in Barbados.
And amenities horticulture is one of the areas that is of interest. So as not to leave up the students who have an interest in agricultural science and those types of programs. Amenities horticulture is one that has also been viewed with a lot of interest and is actually to be undertaken by some schools shortly in Barbados. And certainly in Trinidad, I've had the opportunity to visit a few schools there, and they have already have those programs going as well.
So, yes, go ahead.
Additionally, crop production, which goes along with men's health, that's also being offered quite soon as well.
In Barbados.
In Barbados.
But my understanding is that the CARICOM has developed quite a number of standards for the CVQs. Could you just tell us how does that work, the development of the standards?
Okay, basically, what CARICOM would have done would have been looking at the NVQ program, and they would have taken some of those standards and actually converted them into CVQs, which are the qualifications that we use within all the territories. And the CVQs basically were validated to ensure that they meet particular countries' context, and then they were basically offered to various territories. And basically that's the procedure that was used to develop or to offer before the CVQs are offered within secondary schools.
Dr. German, about approximately how many standards, occupational standards, have been developed so far, or approximately in the region? Because my understanding is that there are quite a number of them.
Yes, there is. I actually was doing a check last week, and I think I counted somewhere in the vicinity of close to 30 occupational standards. Now, let me make a point here and clarify something, because when we get to the actual occupational standards, because they're being used regionally and across the Caribbean, as I said, they're referred to as regional occupational standards. And a lot of these standards were actually developed by other organizations. For example, some of these standards would have been developed by Jamaica, for example, and through various arrangements, CARICOM has been able to use these standards. And when they're being used in the regional setting, they're referred to as regional occupational standards. So as I told you, I wasn't really doing the count, but from going through them quickly sometime last week, I found over 30 regional occupational standards that are available for use. And that can be used as actual Caribbean vocational qualifications.
Right. One other thing I want both for you gentlemen to clarify for us is that I understand and I've seen in some documentation that they speak about a transcript, and then they speak about a Cvq certificate. How does that work? Is it that you have units under each Cvq? Can you explain that for us?
The Caribbean vocational qualification, as with the national vocational qualification, is made up of a series of units. The occupational standards themselves are composed of a series of units. Each unit is a particular aspect or work activity to be performed that collectively forms part of what an individual will perform in a particular type of job. Out of these units, students can actually gain units of certification, or they can opt to do the entire Caribbean vocational qualification. At the end, they will get a full Cvq. Or, as I said earlier, they can get the units of certification based on the units that have been completed and certified as being completed according to the requirements of the program.
So each Cvq composes of or comprises of several units.
Yes. Correct.
And a student can do those units individually and be certified.
Correct.
And on completion of all of the units, they get a Cvq.
Yeah. The other advantage, I would say, that the Cvqs and the method of certification will have over traditional types of qualifications is that there's a clear understanding as to what the individual can do. Because number one, the employer can have access to the standards so that they can see exactly what the standards are saying the individuals can do. And once an individual has been trained and prepared according to the requirements and has been assessed and found to be competent, then it is clear for the candidate, for the employer, and for any other persons that are interested, they will know exactly what it is that the student can do or the candidate can do.
Right. I want to go back to Mr. Wilshire, because I recall 2 years ago visiting your school, the St. Lucie Secondary School here in Barbados, which in our view was one of the trailblazers in Barbados with the Cvq. Tell us a bit about the experience of implementing the Cvq in a secondary school setting. I mean, what were some of the exciting things that the students found, and what were some of the challenges that you found as a teacher?
Start with the challenges so we can end with positive.
Okay.
Right. Some of the challenges, the first major challenge was getting buy-in. Because in mainstream, we decided to start with carpentry, masonry, and electrical installation. And because we started with those areas, persons thought first that it was CVQs were for persons who were low achievers. But in truth and fact, CVQs are for everybody. The difference is that between CVQs and other examinations is that they can be tweaked or developed to suit the level of a student. So that was one of the main challenges. And then challenge we had was basically getting workshops up to the required standard. Because within the CVQ program, you have to deliver the program within a context that meets the standards set up by the awarding body and the National Training Agency. So that was also another challenge. But basically, in terms of implementation then, the found students were very interested in the whole concept of this CVQ program. They weren't sure what it was about at the beginning, but as they got to be more involved in the program, we found that the students' self-esteem rose because they were now actually doing something that they can actually handle, and it was developed to suit their ability. There was a job attachment component, and the students thoroughly enjoyed the possibility of actually going to industry and actually work as an electrician alongside established professional electricians. Masons went into industries and actually work on actual projects that came to completion. So we found that students who would normally not come to school every day, who would have dropped out between the mid school year, actually continued to come to school to the end of their school life. And they were very enthusiastic about the safety program. They got to address all the safety gear that was needed because safety is always emphasized in the program. And we found that the students really enjoyed being part of the program. And by extension, the school and the teachers also benefited from this experience in that the delivery method, in the CVQ methodology, also helped to professionally develop the teachers as well. And they use that methodology to teach other areas that are not in the CVQ program. So the journey in terms of St. Lucie Secondary School, now Del Jordan, was a very interesting one and rewarding in that the program was able to come to the limit with slight challenges, and now we have students who are fully involved in the program, and it's going pretty well there at this point in time.
Excellent. And as you're in a different role now as the TVET officer responsible for, TVET in Barbados, how many other schools in Barbados are involved in CVQ? Okay, well, initially there were 3 schools that were in pilot, 3 of 5 started. So we have 12 schools now involved in the program in the secondary schools. And these some are at the stage where they are beginning to offer the program, while others are in the implementation stage where they're now getting their workshops together up to standard, and they're now basically making sure they can begin the program in earnest from September. Okay. Dr. John, on the regional scene, how many countries do we have involved in the CVQ program right now?
I think we have somewhere in the vicinity of 6 countries fully on board with the CVQs, and others slowly joining the group. As a matter of fact, tomorrow I will have the opportunity to go to Dominica to conduct some pre-readiness audits, which is one of the stages that the schools have to go through in order to be able to be certified to conduct the programs. And some work was done there previously, but these are some other schools that are coming on board in Dominica, and they have to go through this audit, and I will have that opportunity to conduct those audits from Wednesday in Dominica. And we've had Trinidad and Tobago, we've had St. Vincent expressing interest, St. Lucia has done some work in the area, St. Kitts, we've had some expressions from as far up as St. Martin as well.
Okay, just to go back to one of the comments that Mr. Wilshire made in his opening in terms of levels. Tell us about the levels. Where does the CVQ go in terms of levels? There are different levels of accomplishment, of achievements. How is it structured?
But generally, there are 5 levels that we talk about. Start at level 1, which is described as the lower level. and then moving up to level 5. As far as the CVQ is concerned, and CXC's involvement, our involvement will go as far as level 2, because we have been mandated to offer certify the CVQ in schools up to the Cape level, and that can go as far as level 2. Beyond that, it then becomes the responsibility of the national training agencies, for example, the Tibet Council in Barbados, or in the case of Trinidad and Tobago, the National Training Agency, to take it from there.
Okay. Let me remind you that you're looking at a webinar on the Caribbean Vocational Qualification, commonly called CVQs. And if you would like to ask a question or make a comment or share a thought with us, you can do so on the webpage where this webinar is being streamed. Let's now look at the partnership, because the CVQ is offered as a collaboration among 3 entities. The Caribbean Examinations Council as the examining board, ministries of education in the countries, and the national training agencies, as Dr. Gemma just referenced. And I will also remind our viewers that we will be joined by Mr. Henderson Eastman, who is the Executive Director of the Tibet Council in Barbados, which is the national training agency for Barbados. So tell us, how does the partnership work?
Now, the CVQ program in Barbados has a tripartite arrangement between, as I mentioned before, CXC, Tibet Council, and Ministry of Education. The role Tibet Council plays in the tripartite arrangement is that they're basically the quality assurance mechanism agency. They basically ensure that standards are developed and maintained. They also look after the facilities of the institutions that are looking to award or to offer CVQs. For example, the centers, before they are granted permission to deliver the program, they have to be audited by Tibet Council or CXC. But Tibet Council basically performs that quality assurance role within the program. CXC, they are the awarding body for CVQs in different secondary schools, and they also perform the quality assurance role as well. But they look at it from the perspective of awarding certificate to make sure that when students are awarded a certificate, that they have indeed gone through what is required to be awarded a certificate. And of course, the Ministry of Education basically provides the support to the schools to ensure that the schools are up to standard and that teachers are trained and that the program within schools is properly monitored and maintained.
Okay, so Dr. Jemot spoke about the fact that he's actually traveling to Dominica, which is one of CXC's participating territories, to conduct audits. Dr. Jemot, can you walk us through what a pre-readiness audit looks like? Okay,
thank you. The pre-readiness audit is that first stage, so to speak, of the quality assurance activity. Bear in mind that Caribbean Examinations Council will be placing its name and reputation basically on these qualifications, and therefore we have to ensure that the institutions and the work done by the candidates meet the required standards and requirements. So therefore, we start with a pre-readiness audit. In this audit, what we're looking for is to ensure that the institution is meeting the requirements, that it has those basic requirements, tools, and other resources in place to be able to successfully conduct the program. We do not want a situation where schools are starting programs with candidates, and candidates are reaching a portion or completing a portion of the program and can't complete the rest of it because the resources are not there. So the pre-readiness audit helps with this. Now, because we are looking at work being done in situations that, in a sense, mimic what happens in the real world of work, we need to ensure that the facilities are up to standard. So apart from the facilities checks that are done by the NTAs, the national training agencies, we go through and we do our own checks. We also have an interview, an audit with the head of the institution. The reason why we focus on the head of the institution is because we want to ensure that the head of the institution has buy-in. The term that was used just now by my colleague, Mr. Wiltshire, buy-in. That's very critical to ensuring that not only is it a situation where the school is saying that we are offering CVQs, but that the administration of the schools, the teachers in the schools, and those who are actually delivering the programs, as well as the students, are clear with respect to what CVQs are about and what is the intended aim. So we go through that audit with the principals, the head of the institutions, and in this case what we're doing, we're looking to get their understanding of where they are in relation to various aspects that are on some rated scales that we use. Out of this, what we're able to do is to see where their weaknesses and suggest avenues through which they can correct these weaknesses. Some of these weaknesses obviously might relate to facilities, and from that point of view, the partnership with the Ministries of Education help, because they are the ones who are essentially providing the resources and so forth to get these programs going. So we're checking for those things. When we indicate that, or if it is clear that an institution has weaknesses in certain areas, they may be considered to be non-compliant. Where they are okay in particular areas, they are noted as compliant. There may be comments written such as there's a work in progress, that is that they're moving through the various stages to get to a point where they are can be considered compliant, and we complete that part of it. So this is a pre-readiness audit. Once the program is started, that program can actually be started before before all the requirements of the pre-readiness audit, all those components are complete, because the pre-readiness audit is actually to check the progress of the institution, but at the same time the institution can also be building itself towards reaching the stage where it can be fully compliant. Once the program is started and the candidates are working, the students are working, and the program is going, there can also be another audit which is titled during production audit, where an institution can make that request to come to ask CXC's personnel to come in and review what's going on. It helps. It's very, very helpful in the sense that it's a kind of a check to ensure that you're still on track, that you've not wavered from the path that you're expected to be on. And then finally, there is the end of production or end of training audit. When the school has signaled to the local registrars that their candidates are ready to be fully assessed, the local registrars will indicate to CSC that is the case. And what we do, we go in there basically at the back end to do another quality assurance measure. That is, and in this case, this is called the end of production audit, where we go through the same processes that we went through with the principal or the head of the institution at the beginning. And then 2 other audits are conducted. The second audit is with staff who actually worked on the program with the students. And the third one would be with the students themselves, where we take a sample of students, samples of their work, where we actually go through their portfolios, see some of the physical work that they have actually produced, and we also take the opportunity to interview them and to discuss with them the work that they have done. So essentially those are the 3 stages that the quality assurance process goes through.
I would say, wow. Seems like a very thorough undertaking on the part of all concerned. Mr. Wilshire, you would have experienced this from the other end, because again, I remember visiting your school while one of these audits was taking place with CXC and the Tibet Council, as well as them reps from the Ministry of Education. How do you prepare, tell the teachers who might be interested in their school or their institution offering the CVQs, how does one prepare for these audits, both in terms of the student and the institution, a school?
Firstly, in terms of institution, the first thing you need to know is to get yourself familiar with the facility standard, which basically speaks to what equipment and what resources you need for the particular program. And from that document, that will give you an idea about the layout of the room, the number of tools per group of students, basically the physical layout of the room, and also the resources in terms of material such as books, learning aids, or what have you, that you will need for the program. Once you've done that, then you need to be familiar with the instrument that CXC uses for the audit. And in that document, you will be given a list of things that you need to have or to be compliant with. And if you go through that document and you just read through each one for the head of the institution, the student and the teacher, then you will have ideas of what you need to do and to prepare for the pre-assessment audit. Once you go through these 2 documents and you put these things in place and ensure that the facility is basically ready for the visit from CXC, then you will be pretty okay in terms of the visit. But you need to be familiar with what CXC will be looking for when they come, and you prepare students, teachers, principal, and the facilities to facilitate such a audit, which will be a pre-readiness audit.
Leland, could I mention something?
Yes, go ahead.
I need to make it clear that the pre-readiness audit is not punitive. It is intended to be developmental, to help the schools and their various types of other institutions to be able to reach the kinds of standards that we think are necessary for the successful conduct and completion of the Cvq. And therefore, what the pre-readiness audit is intended to do is to bring those institutions to a stage where they are compliant with the requirements for the Cvq. And it must be noted, obviously, that based on the occupational area, the Cvq that's being done, the requirements are going to be will vary, and they will not be the same for every type of Cvq that's offered.
Right. So I go back to Mr. Wilshire, because you, in your explanation earlier, also mentioned the whole issue of job attachment. So you have to get industry involved in the project, in the program.
Yes, because CVQs basically, and MVQs, basically are developed to meet industry standards. So even the standards that we develop have some input from persons who work within the industry. So within the school, in the CVQ program, they actually train students to actually meet what industry requires. And one of the many ways, Dr. can also mention other ways that this can be done, mentioned in the show before, is for, where possible, have students actually being attached to institutions. For example, there are girls in the commercial food preparation program who may be attached to hotels or restaurants. They can actually practice what they will be taught in school, and also they can also learn new things from being in the industry as well. So the job attachment program basically helps students to have an idea as to what is required in the world of work, and not only in terms of skills and knowledge, but also in terms of attitude. Within the work environment, they practice teamwork, punctuality, management of money, and all those employability skills that are necessary for to be equipped with when they go into the world of work. The other way that you can link with the industry as well, in terms of having partnerships where industry can also assist school with material and equipment, or actually come to the school, as Dr. mentioned before, and actually help promote or help students understand what is required from industry. But the work attachment program basically complements what is taught within this institution in terms of skills and knowledge, and actually putting what they're being taught into actual practice on an actual real-life situation as part of the work experience program.
And is it a compulsory component of the CVQ?
It is compulsory in the sense, but the fact that you students go into the world of work is not a compulsory situation. But as I mentioned before, the school can use different ways of involving industry in the program. But I found one of the best ways to do it was to actually get students to actually go into the world of work and actually experience work within industry. But there are other components that I can use to bring up. But within the CVQ program, it's one of the areas that, depending on how you do it within the school, that is a requirement. But you can do it in different ways.
It is very interesting and exciting to have the students involved in work attachment. My experience, having done some end of production audits in some territories, is that when we get to that particular aspect, some individuals have indicated that it has been a challenge. And one of the challenges comes from the type of legislation that might exist, that might limit and does limit the activities that students can actually engage in outside of the school, actually being in the world of work. And one of the ways we can get around that is to actually bring industry. Now, it speaks about industry partnerships, and industry partnerships can involve work attachment. It can also involve personnel from industry coming in and giving expertise to the students in particular areas. And again, this is where the teachers will have to be very mindful of where they can bring that kind of expertise to bear. It can also, industrial experience or work experience can also begin by looking around your own school and examining aspects that are lacking within that institution and that can actually be fixed by the same students from the point of view of giving them the experience in a real world or real work situation. Activities that can happen, that do happen in the real world where you might have brought somebody in, a company in to complete that particular activity or task. You can actually give that to groups of students to perform, and that will give them that work experience. But what will have to leave the compound. So those are some of the techniques that can be employed where principals might be concerned about releasing their students into the real world of work.
But the idea of CVQs really is that when the candidates, when the students would have left school, they should be ready to hit the ground running on the job.
Yes, that's the idea.
And what sort of reports have you gotten from graduates from your program?
A vast majority of students who came to the program and actually went on work experience program actually continue working with the company. The companies, I saw a couple of guys, companies ago, they are still working with the company that they attached with. And speaking with some of the employers, they're generally pleased with the students that have came to the program and actually work with those companies, because in the Cvq program we emphasize not only skills but the employability skills, those core skills. So generally speaking, from employers and speaking to employers, they are generally pretty happy and satisfied with the quality of students that would have come to the program and actually continue working with that company or would have found employment within another company. And in looking at that, I think so far it has been pretty impressive in terms of the students and how they perform in their chosen field as they would have gone off in the program.
Right, so how long does it take for, if I may just step back one. Earlier, both of you mentioned the word competency-based. What does competency-based mean in terms of education and completing a certification?
In terms of competency, basically the development of skills and attitude. And within the program, what we aim to do within the CVQ program is to make sure that students, when they are performing a task or learning a skill, that they basically meet a certain requirement in terms of how competent they are in terms of performing that skill. And along with that skill will come the knowledge. So students basically would perform an activity, maybe do it once or twice, or maybe 3 times, but they would basically aim to, I wouldn't want these words perfect, but reach a certain level that the assessor will be satisfied that they're competent in performing a particular activity. For example, if a student was to connect electrical wiring or bend conduit, they will practice that activity until they are competent or they have reached the required standard that they can be deemed competent in the ability to connect the wires or to bend conduit. So the competency basically will be reaching a certain level that they will be satisfied, or the assessor or whoever is grading the students will be satisfied that they have achieved a certain level in terms of being able to be awarded that indicator.
So this is not a theory exam?
No, it's not totally a theory exam, but literacy and numeracy are important.
Okay.
So it's brought up in different ways.
But we need to make mention here because a lot has been said in relation to skills so far this afternoon. And we need to make it very clear that there's also underpinning knowledge. Right. There's underpinning knowledge that goes along with any activity that an individual has to perform. And a lot of these skill areas do have underpinning knowledge which the students must be able to grasp. Okay. And that in itself will be assessed as well. Right. The occupational standards and how the occupational standards are laid out and the assessment activities all are laid out within the standards, and it is very, very clear what the individual must be able to do. The emphasis obviously
Sorry, Dr. General, don't go any further because you just hit the hammer, the nail on what I was planning to ask next in terms of the pedagogy of CVQs. It is viewed as a skills-based, competency-based program, but I'm hearing you say that, well, it is not just all about skills. My question to both of you who have had quite a number of years experience in this is, how do you assess the pedagogy in the context of a practical program? I mean, it's a little heavy, but I mean, this is I think this is a critical part to make our audiences understand what we talk about when we say that the CVQ is not just a skills-based program, but it also carries some educational pedagogy with it.
Okay. Now, within this CVQ program, as mentioned, we look at skills, but the way how it is delivered, for example, is a play. So if you're doing a practical area, there are some things you need to know that will have a knowledge, that will be knowledge based, that will go with practical skills. So what the knowledge that you are expected to have within the CVQ program is not something in a vacuum or isolated. It's actually a play to a practical area. So when the student goes into these areas, they are not only expected, as Dr. mentioned earlier, to have an idea about the skill component, but there are some knowledge-based aspects as well that needs to be emphasized. So when the teacher develops his or her lesson plan, it will not be based solely on knowledge, on the skills. The underlying knowledge then will come out in terms of how the skill will be applied to actual real-life situation. So for example, if you are writing a report, you report for a carpenter will be something that happened within a work, related incident, something that happened on the job site, or health and safety. So in teaching your English, for example, your communication, you will relate to something that students can apply the information that they're going to be expected to know to that skill area. So the underlying knowledge, as mentioned before, actually is brought out in the, as it is applied to some practical component.
In addition to that, remember, it's also a case of continuous assessment as well. And that continuous assessment, the teacher can be given along with the practical work, quizzes and so on. But then when it comes to assessments, you have certain assessments that are occurring at particular points when the students have indicated that they're ready. That assessment, though it is going to be focusing on the practical, can also be supplemented with or complemented with oral questioning. Generally at the levels that we're talking about, levels 1 and 2 of the Cvq qualification, there's no need, there's very little need for students to be assessed using pen and paper testing. However, for general interest of the viewing and listening audience, as we go higher up in the levels, and depending on the occupational areas, there may also be need for pencil and paper testing to go along with the actual practical activities. So we should not view it, a person should not view it simply as, well, this is a case where it's just hands-on and that's it. Okay, there's the hands-on, but there's the independent knowledge that goes along with it, and that is assessed as well.
Okay, I want to come back to the levels question because I think that is important for people to understand that CVQ is not just a thing about your hands. I want to read a quotation from the Examiner magazine of May 2011, which was a special issue on CVQ and TVET. And I'm quoting Dr. Lucas Jules, Registrar of CXC. Quote, TVET has not taken root in Caribbean education system because notwithstanding the discourse, it is still treated by planners and seen by the public as a compensatory device. It is seen as something that is to be provided to students who, in the words most frequently used, are not, quote, academically minded, unquote. Thus, it is consequentially relegated to second-class status, providing a compensatory alternative that will supposedly guarantee some skilled workforce for this category of workers, unquote, end of quote. How do you respond to people who in 2013 still view CVQ and TVET education both of you gentlemen, because this is one of the issues I know with CVQ in terms of trying to change the image of what CVQ and TVET education is all about.
That's a whole theory. Basically, in 2013, I basically do not entertain. This is my opinion.
That's fine.
I don't debate any further the whole question of the stigma attached to TVET. Many persons state that it's for the quote-unquote academic and it's not for and it's for low achievers. I think we've basically gone past that figure of thought. I think that's gone out. TVET, technical vocational education in most countries is used to actually build economies. And if you're talking about academically inclined, there's absolutely no way a person who is a carpenter or a mason or any of the skill areas does not have any knowledge. If you're thinking in terms of academic as knowledge, in order for you to be a skillful person, you must have knowledge. If you don't know how to do something, I don't think you can do it. So if academia is about basically knowledge, then person that must be academic as well. And you need to have the knowledge to actually do whatever you're doing. Granted, knowledge may come at different levels. I can go that far. But I think the whole question of stigma, attaching stigma to TVET, I think is long gone, and we are in the era now where TVET should be seen as a way of building economies. I just have the privilege of visiting Singapore, and they use TVET to actually drive the economy. Persons there now are that we got persons in certain territories might write off as persons who are less able to do certain things are actually building jet engines, and they are persons who have come through the TVET program who are TVET persons. So in those institutions where the economies are thriving and where their economies are growing, they are seeing the need and the value of TVET education. And I think that we have gone past the idea that TVET is for persons who are low achievers. We all have a part to play in the development of the economy, and we should all embrace whatever occupation or whatever students are able to do in terms of benefiting the economy.
Dr. John, and then we have our first question from our audience.
I don't know if I'm going to be as bold as my colleague to say that we've gone past the stigma, because it's a history, a very long history. But I don't want to dwell on it. What I want to say is that we have had, and my colleague just used an example of Singapore, but we've had lots of examples of where TVET has been used significantly to improve countries. We've heard a lot of rhetoric in relation to that. But the reality is that those governments that say, and as people often say, walk the talk, they put their money behind it. They put their money behind it, and that is what is required. I also would want to suggest that when we look at the types of organizations that have flourished and that have come to the fore in relation to TVET and that support TVET, UNESCO's UNIWOC, Singapore, international level organization, the kind of work that has been done in relation to TVET and the development of TVET has been significant. And I think what people need to do is to see past and get past that little history that has been there, and understand the important role that TVET can play in the development of nations. And so to wrap up this particular response to this question, I think we need to recognize that it is no longer, or should no longer be seen as that we are simply producing people who will be carpenters and masons and so on. Those are important, yes, but we also need to understand how can we integrate the technology. How can we integrate these types of subjects in such a way that we are making the best use of technological advancements, that we are able to encourage our students to be able to look at technology as viable ways of developing themselves and their families and their nations.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying that. I hope that we have put that to rest probably once and for all. We have two questions from those persons following us on the internet. The first question What is the role of Cantor in CVQ? And for our viewers who do not know, Cantor is a Caribbean Association of National Training Agencies, which is a parent body for people like the TVET Council. What is the role of Cantor in CVQs?
Cantor, the Caribbean Association of National Training Agencies, we have identified from earlier, we identified the roles, or the various roles that the national training agencies play. Cantor is an umbrella body of these national training agencies, and they've been mandated through CARICOM and COSAC to move in a direction where they are able to, in a sense, be responsible for the regional occupational standards, to disseminate the materials in relation to the Caribbean vocational qualifications, and essentially to work as an umbrella body to drive the development of TVET across the Caribbean. And not being an executive member or anything like that of Cantor, I will stop at this point so that I do not necessarily say things that do not apply to Cantor.
Okay, so in a nutshell, Cantor is the umbrella body for the national training agencies, so they would have been involved in the setting of the framework for the CVQ.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. And the other question is slightly related, but not exactly. How does the National Training Agency get to award the CVQ? Well, my understanding is that the NTA is part of the tripartite arrangement. Can you explain their role in awarding the CVQ?
I think just a correction. They normally award the NVQ.
Right.
And CXC awards the CVQ. Right. So there are two different rules, but they award vocational qualifications, but the NTA normally awards the NVQ. And that's not awarded in schools, that's awarded in other schools. But the CVQ is awarded
within the secondary schools
by CXC.
Okay, so just to clarify that point to our listener or viewer who may have asked that question, the NTAs award the NVQs. These are for the out-of-school population, whereas CXC awards the CVQs for the secondary school population in the region. Gentlemen, I want to get back to the question of levels of CVQ, because this is, in my view, is critical for us also in terms of having people understand that the CVQ can take you basically to wherever you want to go. My understanding is that you can start at level 1 and end at level 5 with NVQs or other types of technical qualifications, which can explain what sort of levels we're talking about here. Dr. Jim.
When you say level,
because in the beginning we spoke about levels 1 and 2, which are the levels that CXC award. But outside of that, where can students go after those 2 levels? My understanding is that you have up to level 5 in other parts.
You see, when we speak of the levels, we're talking about level 1 being entry level, and this is an individual who will enter the world of work having completed a CVQ and can perform various tasks, but will perform those tasks supervised. And as you go up the levels, this is a simplified way of putting it, as you go up the levels, 2, 3, 4, there's less supervision and obviously more responsibility. So that's a simplified way of actually looking at the levels, or identifying the levels from 1 through to 5. So level 1 will be entry level, level 3 tends to be more supervisory, and then we get to levels 4 and 5 is more management levels.
So you're saying that management can actually be some sort of have NVQ at the management level?
Oh yes, when you look at it, there are NVQs, if we go in that direction, because I know we're supposed to be looking at CVQs,
but just to give people context.
Yes, if we broaden it and look at the NVQ, yes, at the management level, I've done, and my colleague here, we have both done ACVQ, well, NVQ, sorry, at level 4, through Jamaica, okay, in assessment, and that's level 4, and I know that there are other levels in terms of 3 or 4 that are closer to managerial in terms of what they offer. If we were to look at the national vocational qualifications and the text and the number of standards, it's very, very low. And if you were to go to the Jamaica website and look at the list of occupational areas that they cover, as far as the national vocational qualifications are concerned, it's a very long list. So lots of occupations have been included, and it just goes to show that the way they're structured, that is the Cvqs or the MVQs, they're structured, the occupational standards, they're structured in such a way that they are testing and assessing individuals' ability to perform tasks, whether it is at what we call the low level, entry level, or higher management levels.
Okay, so in terms, let's get back down to ground now, to levels 1 and 2. In terms of students, candidates who are taking these programs, how long can they expect to be involved before they're certified?
But basically the program is running in the form of what we call competency-based.
Yes.
One of the tenets of competency-based that students work at their own pace. But granted, obviously you want to finish with a particular time frame. But basically students actually work at their own pace to ensure that they develop competency. But within the school setting, obviously students will finish school at around 16, 17. And if you begin the programming for form, they will take 1 to 3 years to complete the program. So it depends on the level of the student. If a student has the ability to move ahead quickly, that student will be able to complete the Cvq in a short period of time, than the person needs to take a bit longer. So it's dependent basically on the student's ability and the pace at which they work. But we are living in a real life context, and we still need to know that there's a pretty time frame that students will finish their work their missions in 1 to 2 years if we send them to school. If you're to do that, there's always the opportunity to complete the program after you left school.
And that will be the MVQ.
No, it's still the Cvq,
Okay.
but there'll be that facility that you can.
Okay, it's good. Right, and then when is the because this is not an examination as such, it's an assessment. When does that take place, Dr. Jim?
Generally, the assessments will occur. We'll be talking, first of all, we're talking about continuous assessment.
Yes.
And therefore, assessments can occur at various points during the candidate's work to achieve the qualification.
Right.
Because we've got the assessments done by the teachers or the instructors. We also have the work that will be done when we bring in the internal assessment, the internal assessors, internal verifiers and rules. And then the external verifiers. When the candidates are performing particular types of tasks, the external verifiers come in to ensure that these tasks are being completed successfully and according to the requirements of the standards.
Right. So basically, the students work at their own pace and they are assessed as when they're ready.
But we have to be careful with this own pace. Ideally, the competency-based education training program would say yes that a person will work at their own pace. But clearly, we do not want someone who's going to be taking 3 and 4 years or 5 years to complete a task that really should complete in 6 months. So there's still that aspect there that will determine, guide and help them to determine what kind of pace they should really be moving at.
Right. Okay, just to remind you that you are viewing a webinar on the Caribbean Vocational Qualifications. On the panel with me, Dr. Hamilton Jemmott, Measurement and Evaluation Officer here at CXC, and Mr. Henderson Wilshire, the Education Officer responsible for TVET education in the Ministry of Education here in Barbados. And we are discussing Cvq, as I said. Gentlemen, we have been speaking mostly of secondary schools, but I know that there are quite a few private institutions who may be interested in offering these qualifications. How can private institutions become involved? And Dr. Jemmott, again, in the context of our soon-to-be-launched Second Chance project sponsored by USAID, how can private institutions become involved in offering the Cvqs?
Thank you. Without stealing anybody's thunder, which apparently will roll sometime later this month, the initiative by USAID, that project which the Caribbean Examinations Council is involved in, is designed to encourage institutions that basically give individuals a second chance to use the Caribbean Vocational Qualifications as one of its qualification rules. And I say one of them because the other aspects that we looked at.
CCSLC as well.
Correct, the CCSLC is another one. The CVQ, when we looked at that program, we looked at the institutions. A number of institutions were invited to indicate their willingness to be part of the program. I actually had the opportunity to look at the survey data and identify some of those institutions that are currently offering programs that, in actual fact, when we look at them, are suitable to be certified using the Caribbean Vocational Qualifications. And then there were some other institutions that also indicated that they are willing to offer certain types of programs. And when I looked at the types of programs that they're willing to offer, some of these can also be certified through Cvq. And because, again, we're talking about second chance, that is individuals who may have left school early for various reasons, and I need not go into those now, but who would like the opportunity to be able to get back into education and training. This program is actually for them and targeting them through the various institutions that exist in their different territories. And we're talking here, the last count, it was 9 territories that are actually involved in the program. And therefore, they have the opportunity to come into to use the CVQs as one of their certification modes. And because of the level that they will be operating at, they can actually be certified by CSC at levels 1 and 2 as well. Right. Similar to what we're talking about in relation to the secondary school setting.
And we're talking about existing institutions who are offering programs.
Yes, institutions in these 9 territories that I told you about that are currently offering programs. And the view is to look at those programs, look to see where we can align what they're currently doing with Caribbean Vocational Qualification, because essentially we're talking about giving individuals qualifications that they can use in the real world of work. Because in some instances, some of the programs may not have offered a qualification that has the kind of recognition that they can get using through the CSC certified CVQ.
Right, and we have just about 3 minutes, 2 minutes as I would. I'm being told by my director. We have 2 minutes to go. A little bit on recognition of the CVQs. A CXC branded qualifications. There are no issues with recognition as far as you know, those gentlemen.
As far as no issues. CXC is a recognized brand across not only the Caribbean but other parts of the world, and I have no doubt that CVQs will, as they grow, become a significant player in the CSC's qualification arsenal.
Thank you. Mr. Wilshire, somebody who has been on both sides of the fence, in the school as a teacher and now in the ministry trying to implement the program throughout Barbados. What encouragement can you give to teachers, students, parents, employers about the CVQ program?
Well, first of all, I would like to encourage all stakeholders to embrace the CVQ program. It's one of the few programs that actually trains or certifies a child that can actually perform within a work environment because of its work-related nature. And it actually helps students within the school setting that can actually go into the world of work and require minimum training and actually perform their work role effectively. And one of the, as I mentioned earlier, one of the important components of the CVQ is the employability skills component. Most employers now are stating, most of them are saying that students come to school, go into the world of work, and they do not know how to actually perform their role, not the skills or the knowledge part, but actually how to actually behave within the world of work. And within the CVQ program, that is emphasized. So in terms of communication, a lot of students basically at school and going to the world and can't communicate verbally or actually express themselves. You finish the Cvq program, you are trained and encouraged and assessed in how you actually communicate with others. So a student coming through the Cvq program, they have that advantage in terms of how they are able to communicate, behave, perform, and everything that they would need within the work environment to ensure that their work life is one that is less stressful and that it benefits significantly when they go into the world of work having passed through the Cvq program.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Hamilton Jemmott, Measurement and Evaluation Officer at CXC, Mr. Henderson Wilshire, Education Officer, TVET Barbados. On behalf of Andre Blair, who has been doing all of the behind-the-scenes work, operating the camera as well as ensuring that this is streamed for you live, I am Cleveland Sam on behalf of the Caribbean Examinations Council. Thank you very much for giving me.